Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Jay's Retro Toys and Games for Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022. Episode 7 coming at you tonight with a game that is economics themed, where players roll 2 dice to move around the game board, buying and trading properties and developing them with houses and hotels. You've seen it before. We're going to focus just on the history of tonight's special game that's been around since 1903. Yeah, literally. It's time to play Monopoly, and that's where we are on this edition of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. Welcome to the show on YouTube. I hope you're having a great Wednesday night. Getting close to the end of March here. St. Patrick's Day was good, I hope, as they say. And we're ready to talk about a game that's been around. Well, a lot of people think it's been in the 1930s, but the early history dates it back to 1903. You know, it's derived from the Landlord's game created by Lizzie Magie. And it was a way to demonstrate that an economy that rewards wealth creation is better than one where monopolists work under few constraints, and to promote the economic theories of Henry George, in particular his ideas about taxation. Well, the Landlord's game had 2 sets of rules originally, one with taxation and another one mainly based on current rules. When Monopoly was first published by Parker Brothers in 1935, it did not include the less capitalistic taxation rule, which resulted in a more competitive game. Parker Brothers was eventually absorbed into Hasbro in 1991. The game is named after the economic concept of monopoly, the domination of a market by a single entity. So we're going to look at just the rules, the history. You've seen all the versions of the boards. You know the game itself. We're primarily looking at the history. So the history of Monopoly can be traced back to 1903, when American anti-monopolist Lizzie Magie created a game which she hoped would explain the single tax theory of Henry George. It was intended as an educational tool to illustrate the negative aspects of concentrating land in private monopolies. She took out a patent in 1904. Her game, the Landlord's Game, was self-published beginning in 1906. Magie created 2 sets of rules, an anti-monopolist set in which all were rewarded when wealth was created, and a monopolist set in which the goal was to create monopolies and crush opponents. Well, several variant board games based on her concept were developed from 1906 through the 1930s. They involved both the process of buying land for its development and the sale of any undeveloped property. Cardboard houses were added, and rents increased as they were added to a property. Magie patented the game again in 1923. According to an advertisement placed in the Christian Science Monitor, Charles Todd of Philadelphia recalled the day in 1932 when his childhood friend Esther Jones and her husband Charles Darrow came to their house for dinner. After the meal, the Todds introduced Darrow to the Landlord's Game, which they then played several times. The game was entirely new to Darrow, and he asked the Todds for a written set of the rules. After that night, Darrow went on to utilize this and distribute the game himself as Monopoly. Parker Brothers bought the game's copyrights from Darrow. When the company learned Darrow was not the sole inventor of the game, it bought the rights to Magie's patent for $500. Parker Brothers began marketing the game on November 5th, 1935. Cartoonist F.O. Alexander contributed the design. U.S. patent number US 2026082A was issued to Charles Darrow on December 31st, 1935 for the game board design and was assigned to Parker Brothers, Inc. The original version of the game in this format was based on the streets of Atlantic City, New Jersey. Parker Brothers began licensing the game for sale outside the United States in 1936. In 1941, the British Secret Intelligence Service had John Waddington Ltd., the licensed manufacturer of the game in the United Kingdom, create a special edition for World War II prisoners of war held by the Nazis. Hidden inside these games were maps, compasses, real money, and other objects useful for escaping. They were distributed to prisoners by fake charity organizations created by the British Secret Service. In the Nazi-occupied Netherlands, the German government and its collaborators were displeased with Dutch people using Monopoly game sets with American or British locales and developed a version with Dutch locations. And since that version had in itself no specific pro-Nazi elements, it continued in use after the war and formed the base for Monopoly games used in the Netherlands up to the present. Economics professor Ralph Anspach published Anti-Monopoly in 1973 and was sued for trademark infringement by Parker Brothers in 1974. The case went to trial in 1976. Anspach won on appeals, and in 1979, as the Ninth Circuit Court determined that the trademark Monopoly was generic and therefore unenforceable. The United States Supreme Court declined to hear the case, allowing the appellate court ruling to stand. This decision was overturned by the passage of Public Law 98620 in 1984. And with that law in place, Parker Brothers and its parent company Hasbro continued to hold valid trademarks for the game Monopoly. However, Anti-Monopoly was exempted from the law, and Anspach later reached a settlement with Hasbro and markets his game under license from them. The research that Anspach conducted during the course of the litigation was what helped bring the game's history before Charles Darrow into the spotlight. Hasbro acquired Parker Brothers and thus Monopoly in 1991. Before the Hasbro acquisition, Parker Brothers acted as a publisher, only issuing 2 versions at a time, a regular and deluxe. Hasbro moved to create and license many other versions of Monopoly and sought public input in varying the game. A new wave of licensed products began in 1994 when Hasbro granted a license to USAopoly to begin publishing a San Diego edition of Monopoly, and which has since been followed by more than 100 more licensees, including Winning Moves Games since 1995 and Winning Solutions Inc. since 2000 in the United States. The company held a national tournament on a chartered train going from Chicago to Atlantic City in 2003. Also that year, Hasbro sued the maker of Ghetto-opoly and won. In February of 2005, the company sued Rad Games over their super add-on accessory board game that fit in the center of the board. The judge initially issued an injunction on February 25, 2005 to halt production and sales before ruling in Rad Games' favor in April of 2005. The speed die was added to all regular Monopoly sets in 2008. After polling their Facebook followers, Hasbro Gaming took the top house rules and added them to a House Rules edition released in the fall of 2014 and added them as optional rules in 2015. Then in January of 2017, Hasbro invited internet users to vote on a new set of game pieces with this new regular edition to be issued in March of 2017. May 1st, 2018, the Monopoly Mansion Hotel Agreement was announced by Hasbro's Managing Director for Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, Jenny Chu Yen Ni, with M101 Holdings, SDNBHD. M101 has the 5-star, 225-room hotel, then under construction, located at the M101 Bukit Bintang in Kuala Lumpur, and would have a 1920s Gatsby feel. M101's Sirocco Group would manage the hotel when it opened in 2019. Hasbro announced in March of 2021 that its plans to update the community chess cards with ones that will be more socially aware, inviting fans of the game to vote on the new versions. So, you know the game. Let's take a look quickly at the board. The Monopoly game board consists of 40 spaces containing 28 properties, 22 streets grouped into 8 distinct color groups, 4 railroads, 2 utilities, 3 chance spaces, 3 community chest spaces, a luxury tax space, an income tax, and the 4 corner squares, which is go, in jail just visiting, free parking, and of course go to jail. Now there have since been some changes to the board. Not all of the chance and community chess cards are shown in the 1935 patent were used in editions from 1936/37 onwards. Graphics with the Mr. Monopoly character, then known as Rich Uncle Pennybags, were added in that same time frame. A graphic of a chest containing coins was added to the community chest spaces, as were the flat purchase prices of the properties. Traditionally, the community chest cards were yellow, although they were sometimes printed on blue stock with no decoration or text on the back. The chance cards were orange with no text or decoration on the back. Hasbro commissioned a major graphic redesign to the U.S. Standard Edition of the game in 2008. along with some minor versions and some revisions. And among the changes, the colors of Mediterranean and Baltic avenues changed from purple to brown, and the colors of the Ghost Square changed from red to black. Now, a flat $200 income tax was imposed, formerly the player's choice of $200 or 10% of their total holdings, which they could not calculate until after making their final decision. Originally, the amount was $300, but was changed a year after the game's debut, and the luxury tax amount increased to $100 from $75. There were also changes to the chance and community chess cards. For example, the poor tax, the receipt for services, the Christmas fund matures, and the Grand Opera opening cards became speeding fine, receive 25 consultancy fee, holiday fund matures, and it's your birthday, respectively. And though their effects remain the same, the players must pay only $50 instead of $150 for the school tax. Inflation, I guess. And in addition, a player now gets $50 instead of $45 for sale of stock. And the Advanced Illinois card now has the added text indicating a player collects $200 if they pass go on the way there. All the Chance and Community Chess cards received a graphic upgrade in 2008 as part of the graphic refresh of the game. Mr. Monopoly's classic line illustration was also now usually replaced by renderings of a 3D Mr. Monopoly model. The backs of the cards have their respective symbols, with Community Chess cards in blue and Chance cards in orange. Additionally, recent versions of Monopoly replaced the $sign with an M with 2 horizontal strokes through it. In the U.S. version shown below, the properties are named after locations in or near Atlantic City, New Jersey. Atlantic City, Illinois Avenue was renamed Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. And in the 1980s, St. Charles Place no longer exists, as the Showboat Atlantic City was developed where it once ran. The values on the board reflect real estate property values of the 1930s Atlantic City. The 2 cheapest properties, Baltic and Mediterranean Avenue, were situated in a low-income African-American neighborhood. Higher-value properties such as Pennsylvania Avenue, Park Place, and Ventnor Avenue were situated in wealthier neighborhoods. And different versions have been created based on various current consumer interests, such as Dog-opoly, Cat-opoly, Bug-opoly, and the TV movie games, among others, as you know. But looking at the standard version, that's what we've been focusing on this whole program. Marvin Gardens, the farthest yellow property, is a misspelling of its actual name, Marvin Gardens. They put an M-A-R-V-I-N. Instead, it should be M-A-R-V-E-N. Now, the misspelling was introduced by Charles and Olive Todd, who taught the game to Charles Darrow. It was passed on when their homemade Monopoly board was copied by Darrow and then by Parker Brothers. The Todds also changed the Atlantic City Quakers' Arctic Avenue to Mediterranean and shortened the Shore Fast line to the Short line. It was not until 1995 that Parker Brothers acknowledged the misspelling of Marvin Gardens, formally apologizing to the residents of Marvin Gardens. Short line refers to the Shore Fast line, a streetcar line that served Atlantic City. The B&O Railroad did not serve Atlantic City, and a booklet included with the reprinted 1935 edition states that the 4 railroads that served Atlantic City in the mid-1930s were the Jersey Central, the Seashore Lines, the Reading Railroad, now part of Norfolk Southern and CSX, and the Pennsylvania Railroad. The Baltimore and Ohio, now part of CSX, was the parent of the Reading. There is a tunnel in Philadelphia where track to the south was B&O, and track to the north is Reading. The Central of New Jersey did not have a track to Atlantic City, but was the daughter of the Reading and granddaughter of the B&O. Their track ran from the New York City area to Delaware Bay, and some trains ran on the Reading-controlled track to Atlantic City. The actual electric company and waterworks serving the city are respectively Atlantic City Electric Company, which is a subsidiary of Exelon, and the Atlantic City Municipal Utilities Authority. Now, if you want to, we look at, let's see, the here and now, and of course they have ones where they have banking editions, they have a speed die, different cards, different equipment, more money in more cases. They give you extra currency, and now they use electronic banking as well. Really does an interesting job with the editions. As you know, each player starts with $1,500 in their bank. I've seen it where sometimes we've gotten more. Players take turns in order with the initial player determined by chance before the game. A typical turn begins with the rolling of the dice and advancing a piece clockwise around the board the corresponding number of squares. Now, if they roll doubles, they roll again after completing that portion of their turn. A player who rolls 3 consecutive sets of doubles on one turn has been caught speeding and is immediately sent to jail instead of moving the amount shown on the dice for the third roll. You know that already. Player who lands on or passes the go space collects 200. Player who landed on either income tax or luxury tax paid the indicated amount to the bank. Now, in older editions of the game, 2 options were given for income tax. Either pay a flat fee of $200 or 10% of total net worth, including the current values of all the properties and buildings owned. No calculation could be made before the choice, and no latitude was given for reversing an unwise decision. Then in 2008, the calculation option was removed from the official rules, and simultaneously the luxury tax was increased to $100 from its original $75. No reward or penalty is given for landing on free parking. Properties can only be developed once a player owns all the properties in that color group. They then must be developed equally. A house must be built on each property of that color before a second can be built. You know the rules. Each property within a group must be the one with the house level of all other groups within that group. I've also seen rules where they've given rewards for free parking. That was house rules. Jails, mortgaging, you know all of that. Of course, many house rules have emerged for the game throughout its history. Well known as the free parking jackpot rule, which I just was talking about, where all the money collected from income tax, luxury tax, chance, and community chest goes to the center of the board instead of the bank. Many people add $500 to start each pile of free parking money, guaranteed a minimum payout. And when a player lands on free parking, they may take the money. Another rule is that if a player lands directly on go, they collect double the amount, or $400 instead of $2. I never thought about that one. Other commonly used house rules include eliminating property auctions if a player declines to buy or cannot afford an unowned property on which they land, awarding additional money for rolling snake eyes, allowing a player to loan money to another player, or enabling someone to grant rent immunity to someone else, since these rules provide additional cash to players. Regardless of their property management choices, they can lengthen the game considerably and limit the role of strategy. Video game and computer game versions of Monopoly have options where popular house rules can be used. In fact, in 2014, Hasbro determined 5 popular house rules by public Facebook vote and released a house rules edition of the board game. Rules selected including a free parking house rule without additional money and forcing players to traverse the board once before buying properties. Then, of course, there's always strategies, add-ons. There's also an end game, which may take an unlimited amount of time to reach them. One common criticism of Monopoly is that although it has carefully defined termination conditions, Edward P. Parker, a former president of Parker Brothers, is quoted as saying, "We always felt that 45 minutes was about the right length for a game, but Monopoly could go on for hours. Also, a game was supposed to have a definite end somewhere, and in Monopoly, you kept going around and around." Hasbro states that the longest game of Monopoly ever played lasted 70 days. Wow. Oh. And then, of course, there's other related games that deal with Monopoly. There's a lot of spin-offs. Of course, they've got Monopoly for Sore Losers. And you could pretty much scroll down and see a lot of that. They had video games. They even had a game show called Monopoly that was during the summer of 1990. It only lasted about, from June to August? Yeah, so about 3 months. Didn't last too long and was only on for the short amount of time. McDonald's is big, as you know. The McDonald's Monopoly game is a sweepstakes advertising promotion of McDonald's and Hasbro that has been offered in Argentina. In fact, all over the place. And as you know, you could, if you got the Monopoly pieces, you got prizes. Then the big one was Park Place and Boardwalk, which paid out for $1 million. Short-lived Monopoly game show aired on Saturday evenings from June 16th to September 1st. The show was produced by Merv Griffin, hosted by Mike Riley. The show was paired with a summer-long Super Jeopardy tournament, which also aired during this period on ABC. Then, of course, you had the Monopoly Millionaires Club, hosted by comedian Billy Gardell from Mike and Molly. There was also, from 2010 to 2014, the Hub aired the game show Family Game Night with Todd Newton. That was short-lived for 4 years. And in films, Ridley Scott was announced to direct Universal's picture version of the game based on a script written by Pamela Petler. And then they have tournaments, world championships. There's also variants of it, and, well, you know the whole deal about it. And there you have it, friends, a look at Monopoly and its date all the way goes back 100 years, more or less. The game started in 1903, and the publication actually was 1935, so about 87 years from that time frame. But again, under different names, the Landlord's game was first created by Lizzie Magie in the United States in 1903. So we could say that game basically evolved into what we now play today. There you have it, folks. A look at Monopoly right here on Jay's Retro Toys and Games. Next time on the program, we're going to look at a toy that really, had a lot of airtime on commercials. It was a cartoon series, and their toy line was pretty well for the girls. I'm talking about Strawberry Shortcake. That's right. Strawberry Shortcake will be up on episode number 8 of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. I'm Jason Icanio. Hope you had a great time with this edition of the show. We'll see you the next time for more Retro Toys and Games right here on YouTube. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Don't forget to subscribe to the David3000 Network for great more content like this one.